More than 300 million Americans are at risk of a power blackout, all while their electricity bills have already surged roughly 37% since 2020. That's according to a forecast published by the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, and the culprit for this mess is none other than AI. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The trillion-dollar grid bill is being paid not by the hyperscalers consuming all the power, but by the retiree in suburban Virginia who probably thinks Claude is the name of her grandson's cat, and whose monthly utility statement has doubled to subsidize a data center campus she will never set foot inside. So today, we break down how data centers became the parasites eating the American grid, while your utility bill is now a hidden tax funding the AI build-out, what the Iran war has done to natural gas markets that you may not have seen on your statement yet, and which infrastructure players the smart money is positioning around before the rest of the market wakes up. My name is Guy, and this is Coin Bureau Finance. The scale of what is being asked of the American power grid right now is genuinely without modern precedent. On the 29th of January this year, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, released its 2025 Long-Term Reliability Assessment, projecting that US summer peak demand will rise by 224 gigawatts over the next decade. That single figure is a 69% increase over the forecast NERC published just 1 year earlier. Put simply, in 12 months, the projected growth in American electricity demand effectively doubled. For context, Dominion Energy, the utility managing Virginia's grid, has described the surge as the largest expansion in power demand since the years immediately following the Second World War. That's roughly the equivalent of plugging an additional 180 million homes into the system over the next 10 years. But here's the part that almost nobody is pricing properly. That demand is being asked to flow through infrastructure your grandfather built. A significant share of US distribution equipment was constructed between 1950 and 1970, with original design lifespans of just 40 to 60 years. According to Department of Energy data, 55% of in-service distribution transformers are over 33 years old, and roughly 70% of high-voltage transformers and transmission lines have been operating for more than a quarter of a century. Bank of America's analysis indicates that 31% of US transmission equipment and 46% of distribution assets have already exceeded their designed operational lives entirely. And while the demand surge accelerates, the system is shrinking from the supply side simultaneously. NERC's same January report identified 115 gigawatts of dispatchable, fuel-secure generation scheduled for retirement by 2034, against insufficient firm capacity to replace it. Mid-continent ISO, PJM interconnection, ERCOT, and 3 Western interconnection regions are now formally rated at elevated or high reliability risk through the back end of this decade. And ERCOT, MISO, and the Western grid cannot fall back on each other during summer peaks because heat domes hit all 3 simultaneously, eliminating the regional buffer the system was originally designed around. And this begs the question, if the demand is real and the supply is shrinking, then who exactly is paying the bill to keep the lights on? Well, the answer exposes one of the most aggressive wealth transfers in modern American history. A Bloomberg News analysis published in December 2025 using grid status energy data and DC Byte data center tracking found that wholesale electricity costs in regions with significant data center activity have surged by as much as 267% compared to 2020 levels. That figure is now central to a formal Senate investigation led by Elizabeth Warren, Chris Van Hollen, and Richard Blumenthal. Meanwhile, EIA data confirms that the average residential electricity rate has climbed from around 12.76 cents per kilowatt hour 5 years ago to 17.44 cents as of February this year, a national increase of nearly 37%. And forced disconnections for non-payment have risen from 3 million in 2023 to a projected 4 million in 2025. Now, consider Loudoun County in Northern Virginia, which hosts more than 200 operational data centers and serves as the world's largest hyperscaler cluster. In November last year, Virginia's State Corporation Commission approved a Dominion Energy filing that raises the typical residential bill by an additional $11.24 per month in 2026, with another $2.36 increase scheduled for 2027. And according to projections from the Piedmont Environmental Council, citing Dominion's own 2025 Integrated Resource Plan, the average Virginian household bill could climb from roughly $159 per month today to as much as $381 per month by 2045 if data centers do not absorb their fair share of grid investment. Bloomberg has documented the human face of this transfer in detail. Kevin Stanley, a 57-year-old disability recipient living over an hour from Data Center Alley, has watched his electricity bill rise approximately 80% over 3 years. Mary Ruffin in Arlington saw a 25% jump in a single increase. Neither of them owns an NVIDIA server. And the structural mechanism behind this transfer is documented in damning detail by the Union of Concerned Scientists. Their September 2025 analysis revealed that utility customers across 7 PJM states paid $4.4 billion in 2024 alone for transmission upgrades that were specifically required to connect data centers to the grid. And guess what? Those costs are not disclosed in retail rate hearings as data center expenditure. No, they appear in routine utility filings as supplemental projects absorbed into the general ratepayer base by design. It's the textbook definition of socializing the costs while privatizing the profits, and the political response has been almost theatrical in its inadequacy. On the 4th of March this year, the Trump administration unveiled what it called the Ratepayer Protection Pledge, signed by Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, OpenAI, Oracle, and xAI. The pledge is entirely voluntary, carries no federal enforcement mechanism, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, has no legal authority to compel compliance with it. The agency can effectively do, well, FERC all to help regular consumers. Ari Pesco at Harvard Law School characterized the agreement as effectively a pinky swear allowing tech firms to claim political credit while the underlying rate-based investments continue to flow through household bills unchecked. And just 1 month later, in April, Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger amended the state's own cost-shifting legislation to remove its core ratepayer protections after intensive industry lobbying. And this brings us directly to the second fuse that has just been lit underneath your monthly bill. Natural gas now generates approximately 43% of US electricity, and it's the only dispatchable fuel that can ramp up on demand on a July afternoon when the grid is buckling. On the 28th of February this year, the conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran disrupted vessel traffic through the Strait of Hormuz by approximately 95%. Then, a few days later, on the 18th of March, a strike on Qatar's Ras Laffan complex disabled roughly 17% of Qatari liquid natural gas, or LNG, export capacity, with repairs estimated to take 3 to 5 years given specialized component shortages. Asian LNG spot prices surged 143% from the start of the conflict, hitting $20.81 per million British thermal units in March. Brent crude, meanwhile, peaked at around $115 per barrel in early April. And Lloyd's Joint War Committee redesignated the Arabian Gulf as a conflict zone, sending tanker war risk premiums up roughly 12-fold overnight, with quotes reaching 5 to 10% of hull value per transit. Translation? Between $5 million and $7.5 million just in insurance for a single laden tanker crossing one choke point. And here's the structural point the energy markets understand, but consumers have not yet absorbed. Insurance repricing of this scale does not fully unwind. Even after the ceasefire framework declared the strait open on the 17th of April, actuaries have already incorporated the tail risk of future closures into standing premium curves. That premium will sit inside the delivered cost of every barrel and every cargo for the next decade, regardless of who controls the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, US LNG exports are forecast to grow 18% this year and another 10% in 2027, according to the EIA, removing the equivalent of half of 2024's domestic gas volumes from the home market just as power plants need it the most. The EIA projects wholesale power prices at $51 per megawatt hour next year, a 34% increase in just 2 years. Texas wholesale prices are forecast to rise 45% in 2026 alone as data center demand collides with gas tightness. And ERCOT's own post-event review of Winter Storm Uri confirmed that the Texas grid came within 4 minutes and 37 seconds of total cascading failure in February 2021. And the summer version of that stress test is approaching with worse fundamentals against a backdrop where ERCOT is now fielding 220 gigawatts of pending interconnection requests, a 170% increase in just 12 months. Now, this is exactly the kind of macroeconomic transmission, from a missile strike in the Gulf to an insurance underwriter in London to an electricity bill in Ohio, that almost nobody is mapping in real time. But if you want to stay informed about how these structural shifts are reshaping markets and household budgets, then you should be reading the Coin Bureau Finance weekly newsletter. It's absolutely free, and we break down everything regarding global finance, commodity markets, macroeconomic trends, and monetary policy so that you never miss what truly matters. All you have to do is click the link in the description below or scan this QR code on your screen. Okay, now back to the bottleneck inside the grid that almost no one outside the energy industry has ever heard the term for. That bottleneck is the large power transformer. Now, these are the steel and copper machines that step voltage up and down across every substation in the country, handling 90% of the electricity that flows through the system. They cost between $3 million and $10 million per unit, weigh anywhere from 100 to 400 tons, and require specialized heavy-haul rail and crane infrastructure to move. And the lead times to manufacture them have collapsed into a genuine national security problem. As of the second quarter of 2025, Wood Mackenzie data shows average lead times for large power transformers running at 128 weeks, while generator step-up transformers are clocking in at 144 weeks. High voltage 500 kilowatt units have stretched from roughly 50 weeks in 2021 to anywhere between 120 and 210 weeks today. Some critical units are now taking up to 4 years for delivery. There are no US manufacturers producing these at scale either. Approximately 80% of America's power transformer supply is imported, primarily from South Korea, Germany, and China. Wood Mackenzie estimated a 30% supply deficit in the US power transformer market as of August last year. And the Trump administration's Section 232 tariffs on imported steel and aluminium, plus a 50% tariff on copper, are compounding cost pressures on every unit shipped, whether domestic or foreign. NERC's own assessment characterizes utility transformer inventories as low heading into the highest demand summer in modern American history. Now, consider what that fragility actually means in practice. A FERC analysis dating back to 2014, still cited as the operative vulnerability assessment by federal regulators, concluded that a coordinated attack on just 9 of approximately 2,000 critical high-voltage transformers could trigger a cascading nationwide blackout lasting weeks to months, with worst-case recovery scenarios extending up to 18 months. 9 machines out of 2,000 against an inventory described as low with replacement timelines that exceed 3 years. That is the structural exposure the market is finally beginning to price. And here is where the smart money is positioning around it. Institutional capital is rotating away from consumer-facing regulated utilities like Duke, Southern Company and Dominion, all of which have returned somewhere between 6 and 9% year to date, and into the picks and shovels infrastructure layer that delivers electrons regardless of who consumes them. GE Vernova has returned 220% over the past 12 months, sitting on a backlog of approximately $150 billion and gas turbine orders effectively sold out through to the end of the decade. In February, the company acquired the remaining half of Prolec GE for $5.3 billion, vertically integrating from gas turbine to distribution transformer in a single move that no competitor can match. Meanwhile, Quanta Services, the largest US transmission contractor, sits on roughly $44 billion in backlog and has guided 2026 revenue of $33 billion to $34 billion. Eaton has just announced a new switchgear facility in Bellevue, Nebraska, into a US switchgear market projected to nearly double from $17.8 billion in 2024 to $31.8 billion by the next decade. On the independent power producer side, Vistra has signed a 20-year power purchase agreement with Meta for 2,100 megawatts, while Constellation Energy has locked Microsoft into a 20-year deal for the entire 835 megawatt output of the restarted 3 Mile Island plant. Both deals carry pricing structures that consumer-facing utilities will never see. And the Department of Energy is underwriting the entire stack. Constellation has secured a $1 billion federal loan to support the 3 Mile Island restart. A $33 billion public-private partnership between the DOE, the Department of Commerce, SoftBank, and AEP Ohio is funding 10 gigawatts of new generation capacity in southern Ohio alone. And Trump has directed the Development Finance Corporation to stand up a $40 billion maritime reinsurance facility specifically to break the Lloyd's premium blockade on tanker transits. So, there is a quasi-sovereign floor being placed under critical infrastructure suppliers in real time. But the thesis is not without genuine risk. Maine has just passed an 18-month moratorium on new data centers above 20 megawatts. More than 300 data center bills have been filed across 30 states this year alone. Voter support for new data centers in Virginia has collapsed from 69% in 2023 to just 35% as of April this year, a 34-point reversal in 3 years. And short interest in GE Vernova rose nearly 23% in March, reflecting the institutional view that flawless execution is now priced in at a price-to-earnings multiple of approximately 56 times. The bear case, meanwhile, is straightforward. If the 2026 midterms are fought on electricity affordability, the regulatory regime that allows hyperscaler costs to flow through household bills could be partially dismantled before the picks and shovels layer fully cashes in. In the end, the American grid has become the single most underpriced macroeconomic risk in developed markets. A system designed for a 1960s economy is being asked to absorb a 21st century AI build-out against retiring dispatchable plants, transformer inventories at multi-year lows, natural gas markets permanently repriced by a Middle East war, and an insurance regime that has already locked in a tail risk premium for the next decade. So, the era of cheap, abundant American electricity is over. What replaces it is a structurally bifurcated market in which the consumer-facing utility passes through every single shock while the picks and shovels infrastructure layer captures the spread. And the bill, every dollar of that multi-trillion grid investment, will be enclosed in your monthly utility statement for the next 30 years, regardless of who occupies the White House. Will Washington finally force the hyperscalers to internalize the true cost of their power consumption, Or will American households continue to subsidize the AI revolution through their electricity bills until the grid itself breaks? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to understand how the Iran conflict is permanently repricing global energy markets and what that means for structural inflation heading into 2027, then check out that video right over here. That's all from me for today though, so thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you again soon. This is Guy, signing off.